Hello and welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. I'm Nikita Arora. This week we're discussing the government's attempt to make data on important issues unavailable. So as a matter of routine, the government is supposed to publish data on important performance indicators like economic growth, like unemployment, and other important issues like farmer suicides and so on. The logic is simple. To judge any government's performance, you need information and data to be able to make an informed voting choice. But in the absence of data and in the presence of overwhelming fake news and propaganda, it becomes impossible to do that. So what is the Modi government doing then that is so objectionable? Firstly, since January 2018, we don't have a chief statistician in place. Our former chief statistician T.C. Anand retired in January 2018, and since then, no one has replaced him. The chief statistician is responsible for releasing and processing data on important macroeconomic issues like GDP figures, like inflation index, and so on. We also don't have a chief economic advisor since June 2018 when Arvind Subramaniam resigned abruptly from his post. So the government simply hasn't considered it important enough to fill up these important positions in important institutions of our country. Most recently, the government has also attempted to dilute the RTI Act by way of an amendment. Now, under the RTI Act, the ranks, the salaries, the terms of service and the duration of service of the information commissioners is already detailed. What the government wants to do is to take over the power and interfere in all of these matters. So it wants to have the power to vary the salaries, the terms of service, the durations of service of the information commissioners and interfere in the functioning of an autonomous body that is meant to keep an eye on it. RTI activist Vijay Kumbhar said this. He said it is a move aimed at completely wrecking the autonomy and independence of the RTI Act. When the Act itself provides for the salaries and tenures of the Information Commission, why is there a need for the government to meddle with it? Now, this is symptomatic of the government's attitude in general. Their discomfort with the RTI is basically their discomfort with making data and information more accessible to the public and having reservations about this kind of a transparent mechanism. So let's look at some specific instances where the government has played a little bit of a number game with us. One is farmer suicides. First of all, the National Crime Records Bureau has not published farmer suicides data in 2016 and 2017. So the latest figures that we have are from 2015. 2. The methodology that is used to calculate farmer suicides and the way that this data is handled and treated has changed. New categories have been introduced. So before, farmer suicides would appear in the farmer suicides column. So that was clear, it was transparent. Now, farmer suicides may appear in some other category. For example, in Karnataka, the farmer suicides have fallen from 1403 in 2013 to 321 in 2014, which is a huge drop. It's a 75% drop, and that's brilliant. But if you look at the numbers more closely, you will see that there is a huge increase in suicides in the others category. It's gone up from 1482 to 5120 in the same period, which is almost a 245% increase. So we may not be able to draw a definite conclusion, but it does point us in the direction that numbers are being shuffled, new categories are being introduced. And I'm saying that because tenant farmer suicides, for example now, which are farmers who don't own the land, but they rent the land. Their suicides are not categorized as farmer suicides anymore. They're categorized as farm laborer suicides. So this dilutes the number even more. Another point is that the NCRB itself has admitted that these new categories that have been introduced, the data collectors are not trained for these new categories. And secondly, the data is unaudited. Lastly, in 2014, big states, 12 states, including states like West Bengal, Rajasthan and Bihar, which are major agrarian states, reported zero farmer suicides. Not just distress-driven farmer suicides, but zero any reason suicide. So it is impossible to hold the government accountable on farmer suicides with such shoddy data. Let's move on to jobs. Recently, the Prime Minister said, on this issue, more than a lack of jobs, the issue is the lack of data on jobs. I don't blame our opponents for blaming us on the issue of jobs. After all, no one has accurate data on jobs. So here the Prime Minister himself is admitting that we don't have accurate data on jobs. But we should be asking him why that is. The annual labour force surveys have not been conducted since 2016. So in the last 2 years, we don't have figures from this survey that is conducted routinely by any government that comes to power. Why is that? The 2019 election is only a year away and the BJP will most probably swing it without releasing any data. Because if you don't have data, then you cannot judge the economic well-being of a nation. And if you cannot judge the economic well-being of the nation, you cannot blame. So it's a brilliant strategy. But the problem is that in 2014, when he was campaigning, the Prime Minister seemed to have all the data. He seemed to know exactly how much unemployment the Congress government, the UPA government was responsible for. But when it comes to him, the data is not available, the methodology is incorrect, yada yada yada. The data that we have access to today comes from think tanks, it comes from journalists, and according to CMIE, 1.5 million jobs have been lost since the last 4 months of 2016 and the first 4 months of 2017. But the Prime Minister most probably will not agree to these figures because this is what he had to say about employment generation in the Parliament.
लगभग 17,000 नए चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट सिस्टम में जुड़े हैं। इनमें से 5,000 से ज्यादा लोगों ने नई कंपनियां शुरू की हैं। अगर एक चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट संस्था में 20 लोगों को रोजगार मिलता है तो इन संस्थाओं में 1 लाख से ज्यादा लोगों को रोजगार मिला। पोस्ट ग्रेजुएट डॉक्टर, डेंटल सर्जन और आयुष डॉक्टर हमारे देश में 80,000 से ज्यादा पोस्ट ग्रेजुएट डॉक्टर, डेंटल सर्जन और आयुष के डॉक्टर शिक्षित होकर के प्रति वर्ष कॉलेज से निकलते हैं। इनमें से अगर 60% भी खुद की प्रैक्टिस करें तो प्रति डॉक्टर 5 लोगों को रोजगार के अवसर मिलेंगे और ये संख्या 2,40,000 होगी।
So the Prime Minister is basically saying that X number of doctors, X number of accountants, X number of lawyers have graduated. Assume that a certain percentage of them have started their own businesses. Assume further that each one of them is employing X number of people and add it all up and it comes to that magical figure of 1 crore jobs. When the Prime Minister is answering such a pointed question, how much employment has your government been able to generate in the last 1 year? You expect that he will refer to some statistics, some reliable figures that can be cross-checked, that can be cross-referenced, that come from some survey, that come from some research. But this is just wild imagination and mental projections that we're just supposed to take at face value. Imagine this, then imagine that, and then add all of it up and imagine that it would come up to this number. It is not grounded in any fact. It is not grounded in any real numbers. Lastly, GDP. Now, there is a lot of talk about amazing growth, healthy GDP and so on under the Modi government. In reality, the methodology here was also changed. First of all, the base year was changed from 2005 to 2012 and it's going to be changed again in 2019. Secondly, the way that the GDP is calculated was changed. So first, it was calculated at cost. Today, it's calculated at market price, which leads to an instant increase because of the difference between cost price and market price. But per se, the government claims that there is nothing wrong with these things because first of all, the base year is changed routinely, which is true. And secondly, the change in methodology is in line with global practice. Fair enough. But when this happens, the norm is to publish back series data. What is back series data? Basically, the new formula that the government has brought in needs to be applied to numbers from the previous years so that it enables a fair comparison. Otherwise, we're comparing apples to oranges. And this back series data hasn't been published since 2015. So in the last 3 years, we don't have access to this data, and we don't know if the Modi government is actually performing any better than the UPA government, because the methodologies that both of them applied are completely different. Even Raghuram Rajan said this: there are problems with the way we count GDP, which is why we need to be careful sometimes just talking about growth. It's important for us to put pressure on the government and ask for data on all relevant and important issues before the 2019 elections. Fill important posts, release data on unemployment, on GDP, on farmer suicides, on lynchings, on foreign funding, on party donations, and allow us to make an informed voting choice. If the government feels that not providing sufficient data to citizens is the key to creating an illusion of all is well, it's doing an excellent job. But creating darkness to hide is not just juvenile, it's dangerous. If you've enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe, and press the bell icon to get notified every time I upload a new video.